Jar Oil. The company have filling stations across the country, and our rates are relatively cheaper than anyone else across the country. Jar Oil is the biggest producer and distributor of cement in the country with the most competitive prices in the market.
Excellent jam, Wave.
Yo, apply. Yo, luta do dede. Luta munulo jel moto nga andil mahali. Hello?
Busel mo fine.
What?
Busel mo fine.
Oh, yes!
Wave acts in Gambia. Deposit and withdraw money, pay bills, and buy mobile credit without fees. Transfer money wherever in the country for only 1% fee. At Wave, Busel mo fine. Wave, your money is yours.
Professor Lamin Sidibeh is a distinguished psychology scholar whose work has illuminated the complexities of human behavior, mental health, and societal dynamics. With years of experience in both teaching and research, he has helped shape minds and conversations around how we think, how we feel, and how we relate to one another. Today, he joins us to explore the power of psychology, from everyday struggles to cultural influences, and to share practical wisdom for living with greater awareness and emotional resilience. Professor Sidibeh, good to see you again. It's been what? Decades, haven't it? Huh? Since we last shared, a platform. Huh?
Yeah, I think decades. Huh?
Yeah, sure.
Although I've been here, I've been to your radio once or twice since then.
But it wasn't me you encountered in the studio.
So I can say for you, call it decades.
Absolutely.
But thank God.
Tell us a bit more about yourself.
Well, I am, as you see me, I hail from Bakau, Wasulunkunda. As you rightly said, I trained as a teacher, taught as an unqualified teacher for a couple of years, then joined Yunum College, the then Yunum College, to undergo teacher training. It took 3 years. First year I was class secretary because I've always been active, and I think I'm still active, Peter.
You are, yes, you are.
Then finally I became the president of the National Union, actually, of Gambian students, beginning with that of the college at the time, 1960, 67, quite a long time now. Then I taught, had a small spell at Hermitage School, moved to Hermitage, was Crab Island to Latikunda Junior Secondary School, and finally to St. Augustine's High School. I think it's your former school.
Yes, the best school ever in the history of this country.
During Father Cleary's time, actually, very good school. I remember I organized a voluntary organization there called Volu. In fact, some of them who are alive, when they see me, they still call me Volu, some of the students.
Okay.
Voluntary organization. I got that inspiration from Ghana because as a youth and student leader, I had an opportunity to go to Ghana for a work camp, which took about 3 months, constructing, cooking, clearing. And then as a teacher, I thought I could introduce that concept or idea to St. Augustine's High School, which I did. And it was very successful. You know, that area is swampy.
Yes.
They had recently moved there, newly moved. So with students had volunteers helped clear the those mangroves there around the school. And that was very interesting. We went to the hospital to clean up roads. So that was an enjoyable experience. And from there, I proceeded to Denmark to pursue psychology. Primarily, the goal was to do an undergraduate studies in psychology at BSc, then return home to help as usual. First child to come and help the family. But hopefully because of my enthusiasm, I was pushed to go for the MSc and finally PhD. From there, I had determined to come home, really, to come to the hospital then, health, to serve as a psychologist. That did not materialize because actually they had no funds.
Oh.
Dr. Samba then was very honest. He said,
Dr.
we need you, and we've heard about your hard work, but unfortunately we have no funds for a psychologist. Psychology is still an underdog. I mean, not psychology, mental health is still greatly marginalized, intentionally or intentionally. I hope we'll come to that later.
Exactly. I was going to say we'll get into that. What areas of psychology
actually
have you focused on mostly?
Thank you.
In your research and teaching?
Oh, research and teaching. Social psychology.
Social psychology.
But I am quite versatile too, because I'm interested also in developmental psychology, child development, how a human being develops from zero or from the womb to old age, what we call gerontology or gerent psychology. But social psychology has been my main focus in the Gambia because of the serious social problems. But they are all interrelated, by the way.
And what are some of the most common, psychological challenges people face, especially in our own local context?
Yeah, in the Gambia, if you categorize, you say children and adolescents, youth and young adults, then you go to adults in general. It's quite interesting that the most common psychological challenges in this country or in this community are inclined to be anxiety, depression, psychosis like schizophrenia. That's not a very good nomenclature. However, I was saying it in our local languages. Substance abuse is also something to recommend. That's a great problem. These are the most common. Anxiety, depression, epilepsy, substance abuse, and conduct disorder amongst younger ones.
And what are and what are causes of?
The causes they vary. So let's say if you take schizophrenia as an example, where a person is completely off reality. You see them around, sometimes no clothes at all, or they go to the garbage and try to find something, even to eat, to the extreme, for example. When people are laughing, smiling, naming ceremony, they may be crying. When people are bereaved, they may be laughing. Just to give you a few examples. That's quite a severe psychological disorder. And the causes can be genetical, because if your parents, let's say both parents are predisposed, or are victims of, or the family has psychosis. That is why, by the way, when I diagnose, you check the history of the client, the history, the exposure, the environment, etc., the educational level, the stress level, and so on. So when a person is predisposed to, let's say, hypertension or diabetes, which is a health psychology issue, or schizophrenia, the cause may be partly due to inheritance, and partly you may acquire, depending on the circumstances. It's case by case. Every individual would have a different scenario as to how he became a victim, or he has contracted a psychological challenge. We do not like calling people a schizophrenic. We would rather call somebody living with schizophrenia, for example. So it could be biological, it could be acquired. So these are some of the causes, depending on the individual, of course.
Just a moment ago, when you were, giving me the equivalence of schizophrenia in Wolof and Mandinka, you used Dof and Nyamato, and then you said, well, these are not good terminologies. So how does Gambian culture influence the way we talk about and even deal with mental
Exactly.
issues?
There is a lot of, Peter, there is a lot of education and awareness required in this country with regards to mental and behavioral disorders. First of all, the terminologies, we have to straighten them. We need to straighten. That's why I brought that example as a teacher. People need to be educated. Maybe start from the kindergarten, then go to the communities, daycare communities, to educate people about their attitudes and concepts and knowledge about mental and behavioral challenges. For example, dof. Instead of, when you say to people, "Joe denga dof," even if the person is not deaf, he gets angry. And we use it sometimes.
Of course, yes.
There comes the stigma. In the media, in the communities, people use words, maybe involuntarily, to describe that, or when they are angry, or to shame, or to devaluate an individual. So the terminology we use can either escalate or diminish a condition. So there's a lot of education that is required in this country or this community regarding mental and behavioral health. When I came back home finally in the early 20s, I remember I came again, people who had a very low concept and perception of psychology and mental health and behavioral health. At that time, they were attributed maybe 90% to witchcraft, as you know, supernatural causes. Even somebody with epilepsy was maybe ascribed to some supernatural, a curse.
Yeah. Some yellow, as they say in Wolof.
Bad air.
Yes.
They call it bad air. Fonyo Jawo in Mandinka. So, but I can happily say that people's attitudes and concepts are changing. I've seen a lot of changes. In fact, fundamental and impressive changes in the minds of people and attitudes of people towards mental and behavioral health. Now people are beginning to see more and more these problems as natural causes and less, but it's still quite predominant. The traditional beliefs, especially when it comes to stigma, which you mentioned or something of interest to you, are still quite pronounced. And it requires a lot of sensitization, a lot of awareness campaigns or education of Gambians to have to help influence their attitudes and perceptions towards, these problems we have. And I want to add that there is no health without mental health. Even WHO has said this several times, that you are not healthy unless you are totally physically and mentally healthy. And you can see examples. You can have malaria, Peter.
Yes.
And still function.
True.
You can have malaria,
yes,
which is very serious, or
yes,
TB,
yes,
God forbid, and still function.
Well, I have functioned with malaria, or I have functioned in spite of malaria. In other words, I have come to work.
I know, you have malaria now.
Yes.
And
no, I don't have now. Now I don't have.
But you had.
Yes. In the past,
all of us have somehow or the other in the Gambia. You can function with a Masari Labanda, but you look quite shapy now, physical ability. Inability, disability does not equate to inability. So you can function. But where you have a severe mental health, a severe depression or bipolar disorder, or even anxiety, or you are a victim of substance abuse, which has become problematic mentally, it goes to an extent that it becomes clinically significant to the extent that you cannot function. And when you cannot function, despite along with your depression, then it means you have a disorder, because you cannot function. You cannot even lead a family. You cannot be a breadwinner. And if people stigmatize you, it adds what to fire? What do they say? It becomes even more serious. So you can function with a disorder. You can also function with a minor, because by the way, when we say mental behavioral disorder, it's a continuum or a spectrum. It ranges from mild, moderate to severe. There are individual differences. There are people who may have a mild or severe disorder, and yet they can function. You may say they have symptoms of a certain disorder, but they are still functional. I want to give you an example. When you go to personality disorders, I have noticed that quite a number of leaders in the Gambia have some kind of serious personality disorder. Let's say antisocial personality disorder. Leaders.
Mainly.
Top there. Serious personality disorders. Let's say antisocial. That is somebody who does harm to people, no remorse, no empathy, your will has to go.
Are you drawing your arguments from the revelations during the TRRC, the Truth
Of course, the
Reconciliation
revelations, and even now, some you observe, although they have not come to me to be diagnosed, but you can see some of it, Different types of personality, let's say dependent personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder, which means a person who, in Wolof you call it nyaw njorta, suspicious. Even if I look at you, you say, Loma Hole, Doma Bingadon. I'm just giving you an example.
Yes.
So you have, those are people who usually live in denial and very defensive. And in fact, by the way, difficult to treat because they don't believe that anything is wrong with them. That's a serious problem. Just as in stigma, there are 3 categories of stigma. You have social stigma, which I hope you will be interested in. You have self-stigma or internalized stigma, and you have institutional or structural stigma.
Let's take them one by one. Break them down for us.
Good.
Social stigma.
Social stigma is where the community people perceive a person or believe that this, for example, person with a serious schizophrenia is dangerous, can be very violent or harmful. As a result, they stereotype. They say that they believe that all people with mental disorders are dangerous. And you cannot trust them because when you go close to them, when we know that the people who vandalize women and their bags, steal in the streets, your mobile or whatever, are the so-called normal people. You hardly hear somebody, our clients, somebody with a mental health disorder, attack somebody in the streets at London Corner or at going
That's
to,
my area.
Is it? Sorry. At Amasadila Banta.
That's all right.
Or at Bakauke, whatever I want
Wasolunkunda.
Aha, that's right. To be balanced. But you hear quite often so-called normal people committing crime and violence, aggressive crime, agresseur, comme on dit en français. So, but people generalize, and even today, they imagine, hey, Jamfala, keep away from him. He has a problem. Because you fear, and this is terrible because the victim or the person living with the challenge can become very angry. Because to be emotionally disturbed does not mean your intellect is affected. Sometimes there's people who are emotionally disturbed and what they say, I see that in my clinic, to you sounds so intelligent cognitively that you wonder what's wrong with him, but the emotional problem kinds of overshadow these intellectual. So that's one example. That is a social. Then it leads to stereotyping, generalizing. All people with mental health disorders are like this, are like that, are like that. Then from there you have what we call prejudice, where you have a prejudged mind about somebody and it affects your attitude and behavior towards that person. Because somebody has a mental disorder, therefore, he should be excluded. You prejudge the person. That's what we call prejudice. It links to that. And then also it links to discrimination. Because somebody has a mental disorder, you stereotype them, you prejudge them as prejudice, and then you finally can discriminate them. You deny them. I've seen people who deny them from taking a taxi. As soon as they see him doing that, they say, oh, Dofla, Dumoko Yugu. You see? I've seen, I've been in taxis, I've seen that. Balan mamanna ko fail yobu ko ngas said nadama defdara. Just to show people in my little way that him
and taxi drivers had obliged you?
Yeah, and they agreed.
Okay.
Maybe because and he agreed, we reversed. I said I pay you extra, but let's see. So when we were going to watch it, hey, hotayo. When dongo munanyo, dress very nice, talk. Go start her attack la.
Ndongo as in Bandi.
Bandi.
Yeah,
okay. Okay, I'm speaking well of now.
That's all right.
So I was just trying to demonstrate that it doesn't follow. Of course, somebody with a mental health challenge can be aggressive, but normally it's not something intrinsic. It is because the condition makes him, especially the paranoid type, or he feels that people devalue him or her, or discredit him. And what is worse is when you shame them, you belittle them, you despise them, like the taxi driver, intentionally, because out of fear, actually, because of what he believes, that anybody with a mental disorder is most likely to be aggressive or violent.
Yeah.
So I do that a lot by, when people see me sometimes talking to them, people they consider as very violent and no-go area, and they see me talking to them. And sometimes they respond very nicely. They wonder how. Because our attitude is like a chameleon effect. Our attitude towards them affects their reaction to us. You see what I mean? So therefore, coming back to your excellent question from scratch, we have to educate ourselves in the Gambia. Honestly, a lot of education is required.
Okay.
First of all, to distance natural causes from these demonish, supernatural witchcraft causes as much as possible. Of course, once you educate people, usually it affects the beliefs change, and once the beliefs change, most likely attitudes change too. But where people still continue with the traditional orthodox ways of thinking or attitudes and beliefs towards, then that's a problem. That was one. You said define each one. So I defined, I hope I have adequately defined the social stigma. Then we come to self-stigma or internalized stigmas. Internalized stigma is when somebody living with a mental disorder believes that, yes, they say or they think that I am not well, so therefore I will show them that I'm not well, and I'm going to behave as I'm not well. You see, so they internalize it and behave that way. It's called self-fulfilling prophecy in psychology. That you behave the way people think they think you are, and now you believe in that now, and now you are behaving that way. And this way, it's dangerous because usually they wouldn't seek help for treatment. They would not care about, anything. They feel they are hopeless and helpless. And in fact, it can lead quite some people to suicide. Some people with very serious mental health disorder commit suicide because they are hopeless and helpless. And they feel that the society has neglected them or rebuffed them, and they don't see any way they can change, they cannot recover. So therefore, what's worth in living?
Living for, yes.
So people who commit suicide, people should find out why. It always has underlying psychological reasons. It always has a reason, whether it's expressed or not. There is always an underlying factor which motivates them to behave like this or attempt to behave like this. So that is the internalized or self-stigma. Then when we come to the institutionalized stigma, that is where you, like job. I have maybe a mild depression, and sometimes I get depressed. I sit by myself and quiet, for example. But I'm very good in the computer, or a very good statistician. I look for a job in a company, and they know a little bit about my background, or they see in my CV that I have this. I say, oh. Again, because of lack of education. This happens both in public and private institutions, where they are denied jobs, or when they have jobs, they are discriminated within. They are treated, they are isolated, they are treated as if us and them. And this does not help. It aggravates the condition. But where people are welcome, accepted as us, and treated as us, understanding that, bearing in mind that he has a particular problem, which you can have, because we are all vulnerable. I know somebody who has been boasting in the Gambia, oh, my family, I'm on mental health. Just to find out later that the child had autistic spectrum disorder, which is a very severe problem that affects children. Cannot concentrate, cannot look, can restless, combined with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So you see, so you cannot say that you can either be infected or affected somehow or the other along the line. So actually we are all responsible. This us and them, no. Us.
Okay. And all these stigmas, how do they affect the way people living with, mental illness or whatever seek help? And what can we do to, break the stigmatization?
Exactly. Thank you. That's an excellent question again. These stigmas affect these individuals very seriously and in various ways. First of all, they isolate themselves and they are lonely because they feel that they are not accepted and they are not wanted. Secondly, they may not pursue education. Thirdly, they may not, as you said, seek treatment because they feel that they are untreatable, and as a result, they cannot have families. They cannot, in other words, they stay stagnant or deteriorate. And there are many other ways that also they may commit suicide, as I mentioned earlier. Also, they may feel that there's no need to associate. When they associate, they isolate themselves and become lonely. Loneliness itself is a problem. Education, I mentioned. Relationship, I mentioned. They do not have usually the drive to grow or to be better. Because, by the way, I know people who have lived with schizophrenia until they became directors, and yet they have mild schizophrenia. In fact, to the extent that I know one teacher who, to give you an example, who came to me and said, "Professor, I hear voices whilst I was in the car going to Brikama that I should jump out of the van because the van is full of evils. But I took my tusba and I did the word astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. And I knew, as you told me, Professor, that the voice is false. The voice is false. I should not jump out. The voice is not correct."
Okay.
But many of them live in denial. So that's one example. So that can happen. They're exposed to danger. They are angry. They can walk in the streets without being careful of this. That's why sometimes quite a number of them, get involved in serious accidents, are killed actually.
Okay. All right.
So these are some of the demerits of stigma, or the consequences of stigmatization.